Hello friends, and welcome to part 1 of 2020's Halloween Spooktacular. The nights are drawing in, the 12-foot skeletons are enrapturing all, and the cosmic horrors are awakening yet again. And nowhere is that more obvious than in one of the year's most interesting games, a game that snuck out in early access in February and has been lurking in the background of Steam, ready to pounce on unsuspecting horror fans. That game is World of Horror, a game that took old-school adventure games, the mechanics of eldritch horror, and the visual style of Japan's most beloved horror mangaka, and merged them together into a new monstrosity. It's a hugely underrated game that deserves more attention, which is why I'm kicking off this Halloween by breaking the seal and showing you all why World of Horror is rad. What might be obvious from this footage is that World of Horror is trying its best to evoke a certain feel. The whole game is set in the 80s and takes its visual cues from old computer adventures. The limited colours, the line art, the primitive boot-up sequence, the occasional glitches, it's all retro as heck. And what this does is make the game feel like some kind of forbidden relic, like it was genuinely made in the 80s, but the dark knowledge it contained prevented it from being released into the world, and has now been found in an old abandoned classroom by intrepid urban explorers. You know all those creepypastas online all about haunted video games? While they're usually terrible, this feels like what those things are trying to go for. World of Horror sets its tone perfectly from the moment its creaky old boot-up screen starts throwing random kanji at you, and the limited sound and visuals enhance this at every turn. Speaking of kanji, the game goes out of its way to evoke a sense of Japanese horror from the get-go as well. Not just from the use of kanji in Japanese locations, but because most of its visuals look like someone tried to recreate Junji Ito works in MS Paint, which is almost literally what happened. Every enemy design, every playable character's face, every bit of weird twisted scenery, it's all clearly been inspired by the likes of Tomie and Uzumaki, as well as the numerous shorts that Ito has put out over the years. And World of Horror feeds it all through the glitchy, pixelated visuals of its old 80s computer screen, and turns it into something somehow worse than balloons that hang people or sharks on mechanical legs were to begin with. Also, there's this bit of gossip talking about weird holes, but there's no indication if they're custom made or not. More investigation required, I think. Junji Ito being an inspiration is probably what leads us onto this next point, because World of Horror structure isn't a single story, it is an overarching narrative that involves an elder god and a plucky young investigator seeking out answers to strange happenings. But within that, there are smaller stories picked at random each time you play, each with their own individual horrors. There's a school janitor trying to make mermaids, there's a mysterious letter inviting you to a visual for an estranged great uncle, a creepy festival in the woods, and rumours of a bulletin board compelling people to kill themselves. And that's only a selection of the horrors lying in wait. The titles are also delightfully alliterative. It all evokes feelings of a slightly campy yet deeply terrifying horror anthology, and really bringing that title, World of Horror, into sharp focus. It's a really fun structure, as each mystery is its own contained story within the framing device of your teenage investigator trying to get into the lighthouse. It's like if Are You Afraid of the Dark centered around the Midnight Society telling their stories to get to the bottom of why they can't leave the woods. And anything that makes me nostalgic for Are You Afraid of the Dark is a good thing in my book. So I said that different stories are picked at random, but what does that mean? It means that the World of Horror is, wait for it, a roguelite. Normally I don't get on well with roguelites of any kind, but the anthology structure makes it work. There are 14 mysteries at the time of writing this script, with 5 being picked at random with each playthrough. But they also follow a set structure and contain multiple endings, encouraging replayability. By following this partly scripted, partly random structure, it avoids the painful repetitiveness that I find plagues other RNG-based titles. Not to mention, the act of solving a mystery involves a bunch of randomness too. Each segment of the story is reached by doing an investigation into a certain place, and you'll get different encounters. These are also random and can range from a combat encounter where you have to fight a turn-based battle against some kind of creature or a person driven mad, a negative encounter that results in you advancing closer to failure, or a positive encounter that results in something beneficial happening to you, or maybe a skill check that could go either way of the previous two. They don't tend to have much to do with the main mystery at hand, but they're there instead to add to the cocktail of weird goings-on, and that works really well in establishing the game's atmosphere even further. The tension of entering a new investigation each round and not knowing what's coming is huge, and makes a perfect example of a game using RNG in an effective way. Although it does remind me of something. The random encounter mechanic is reminiscent of the board game Eldritch Horror, featuring themes and concepts from the work of H.P. Lovecraft, while jettisoning the casual racism. It's a game that sets a team of investigators against an unknowable being of great unfathomable power and throws random encounters at them. Some of those are skill checks, some are inherently negative, some bring positive effects, and all of them lead to a tension of which of these things you're going to receive. They're random encounters because they come from a shuffled deck of cards. The similarities between Eldritch Horror and World of Horror are huge, even beyond the use of investigators and random encounters. The presence of stamina, sanity, and doom meters which instantly end the game if depleted, the constant balancing act between the three, like deciding if you want to advance the doom level by buying a weapon, or some healing items to help you stay alive. And just like Eldritch Horror is a tense experience as you and your friends try to tackle the oncoming threat against all odds, World of Horror is an equally tense experience that's easy to lose and hard to win. It's a mechanically simple game, but those mechanics just add to the feeling of horror that the game nails so well. My fifth point is the fact that the shop is run by a dog. You can boop the dog. That's the point. I mean, this deserves its own point. Come on now, it's a dog, and you can boop the dog. You get an achievement for booping the dog. All this loving attention to detail to craft such a spooky experience must have taken a lot of work from a lot of people, right? Not even close. World of Horror was entirely designed by part-time Polish dentist Paweł Kosminski in his free time. The game is a passion project of a man who clearly loves his Junji Ito and his Lovecraft, made using MS Paint to help with its unique visual style, designed to make things feel a little bit more off. And it's one of the best games of the year so far, and certainly the best new horror experience I've played from this year. And so if you haven't checked this game out yet, I highly recommend you go and do so right now on Steam. And then all you have to do is try not to lose your mind, the Spider God. Have fun. Thank you for watching the first part of my Halloween Spooktacular 2020, which runs every week in October. Next week I'll be playing Outlast 2 for the first time and offering my thoughts, but if you enjoyed this video and want more, there is plenty of good stuff on my channel. I've got plenty of these videos, including me laying out why Death Stranding was not for me, why Deadly Premonition was terrible and that's why it's brilliant, and celebrating Animal Crossing for the joy that it has been for so many this year. Elsewhere I have Losing the Plot, where I talk about narrative, and I figure if you're into horror stuff like this, the episode on Control might take your fancy, and if not, there's a video coming up at the end of the month in that series that is very much on this subject. Aside from that, don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you can, some support on Patreon would be most welcome. Thank you for joining me, I'll be back soon.